Welcome back, friends of the night, for some more spooky stories out of the Scary Stories Treasury. I'm Mr. Lures, and let's not waste another second. This first story is titled Something Was Wrong. One morning, John Sullivan found himself walking along a street downtown. He could not explain what he was doing there, or how he got there, or where he had been earlier. He didn't even know what time it was. He saw a woman walking toward him and stopped her. "I'm afraid I forgot my watch," he said and smiled. "Can you tell me the time?" When she saw him, she screamed and ran. Then John Sullivan noticed that other people were afraid of him. When they saw him coming, they flattened themselves against a building or ran across the street to stay out of his way. "There must be something wrong with me," John Sullivan thought. "I better go home." He hailed a taxi, but the driver took one look at him and sped away. John Sullivan did not understand what was going on, and it scared him. Maybe somebody at home can come and help me, he thought. He found a telephone and called his wife, but a voice he did not recognize answered. "Is Mrs. Sullivan there?" he asked. "No, she's at a funeral," the voice said. "Mr. Sullivan was killed yesterday in an accident downtown." This story is titled The Wreck. Fred and Janine went to the same high school, but they met for the first time at a Christmas dance. Fred had come by himself, and so had Janine. Soon, Fred decided that Janine was one of the nicest girls he had ever met. They danced together most of the evening. At 11 o'clock, Janine said, "I have to leave now. Can you give me a ride?" "Sure," he said. "I've got to go home too." "I accidentally drove my car into a tree on the way over here," Janine said. "I guess I wasn't paying attention." Fred drove her to the head of Brady Road. It was in a neighborhood he didn't know very well. "Why don't you drop me off here?" Janine said. "The road up ahead is in really bad condition. I could walk from here." Fred stopped the car and held out some tinsel. "Have some," he said. "I got it at the dance." "Thank you," she said. "I'll put it in my hair." And she did. "Would you like to go out sometime to a movie or something?" Fred asked. "That would be fun," Janine said. After Fred drove off, he realized he did not know Janine's last name or her telephone number. "I'll go back," he thought. "The road can't be that bad." He drove slowly down Brady Road, through a thick woods, but there wasn't a sign of Janine. As he came around a curve, he saw the wreckage of a car ahead. It had crashed into a tree and had caught fire. Smoke was still rising from it. As Fred made his way to the car, he could see someone trapped inside, crushed against the steering column. It was Janine. In her hair was the Christmas tinsel he had given her. The next story is titled A Little Black Dog. Billy Mansfield said that a little black dog followed him wherever he went, but he was the only one who saw it, so people thought he was the kind of crazy. To drive the dog away, Billy was always hollering at it, throwing rocks at it, but the dog always came back. The first time Billy saw that dog was the day he fought Silas Burton. Billy was just a young man then, but the Burtons and Billy's family had been feuding for years. When Billy saw Silas riding toward him, he went for his gun, and Burton went for his. But Billy fired first. He hit Burton in the back, knocking him from his horse. Burton's horse ran off, and his gun fell where he couldn't reach it. He lay there on the ground, pleading with Billy not to kill him, but Billy killed him anyway. Burton's little black dog was with him when he was shot. The dog kept licking Burton's face and barking and snarling at Billy. In his anger, Billy killed the dog too. There wasn't much law enforcement in those days, so Billy wasn't arrested. But all that night he heard Burton's dog outside his cabin, scratching on his door and barking to be let in. "I'm imagining this," Billy said to himself. "I shot that dog. It's dead." But the next morning Billy saw the dog. It was waiting for him outside. Then on, there wasn't a day when he didn't see it, and there wasn't a night when he didn't hear it scratching on his door, barking to be let in. From then on, Billy was always finding that black dog hairs on the sofa, on the floor, in his bed, even in his food. And the house and the yard stank of dog. That's what Billy said. Whenever somebody told him there wasn't any dog to see, he'd say, "Maybe you don't see it, but I do. And I'm not any crazier than you are." Things went on like that for many years. Then one morning in the middle of the winter, the neighbors didn't see any smoke coming out of Billy's chimney. When they went over to check, Billy wasn't there. A day or so later, they found his body lying in the snow in a field in the back of his cabin. Billy had plenty of enemies, and at first it seemed like someone might have killed him, but there wasn't a mark on his body, and there weren't any footprints out there, except for Billy's. The doctor said Billy probably died of old age, but there was something odd about his health, or about his death. When the neighbors found Billy, there were black dog hairs on his clothes. There were even a few on his face. It smelled like a dog had been out there, yet no one had seen a dog anywhere. Our next story is titled Clinkity Clank. An old lady got sick and died. She had no family and no close friends. So the neighbors got a gravedigger to dig a grave for her. And they had a coffin made, and they placed it in her living room. As was the tradition, they washed her body and dressed her up in her best clothes and put her in the coffin. When she died, her eyes were wide open, staring at everything and seeing nothing. The neighbors found 2 old silver dollars on her dresser, and they put them on her eyelids to keep them closed. They lit candles and sat up with her so she would not be too lonely on that first night that she was dead. The next morning, a preacher came and said a prayer for her. Then everybody went home. Later, the gravedigger arrived to take her to the cemetery and bury her. He stared at the silver dollars on her eyes, and he picked them up. How shiny and smooth they were. How thick and heavy. They're beautiful, he thought. Just beautiful. He looked at the dead woman. With her eyes wide open, he felt she was staring at him, watching him hold her coins. It gave him a creepy feeling. He put the coins back on those eyes of hers to keep them closed. But before he knew it, his hands reached out again and grabbed the coins and stuck them in his pocket. Then he grabbed a hammer and quickly nailed the coffin lid shut. "Now you can't see anything," he said to her. Then he took her out into the cemetery and buried her as fast as he could. When the gravedigger got home, he put the 2 silver dollars in a tin box and shook it. The coins made a cheerful rattling sound, but the gravedigger wasn't feeling cheerful. He couldn't forget those eyes looking at him. When it got dark, a storm came up, and the wind started blowing. It blew all around the house. It came in through the cracks and around the windows and down the chimney. Bazoo! It went. Biz, biz, bazoo! The fire flared and flickered. The gravedigger threw some fresh wood up on the fire, got into bed, and pulled the blankets up to his chin. The wind kept blowing. Blazoo! It went. Biz, biz, bazoo! The fire flared and flickered and cast evil-looking shadows on the walls. The gravedigger lay there thinking about the dead woman's eyes staring at him. The wind blew stronger and louder, and the fire flared and flickered and popped and snapped, and he got more and more scared. Suddenly he heard another sound. Clinkity clink, clinkity clink it went. Clinkity clink, clinkity clink. It was the silver dollars rattling in the tin box. "Hey, who's taking my money?" the gravedigger shouted. But all he heard was the sound of the wind blowing. Biz, biz, bazoo! And the flames flared and flickered, and snapping and popping, and the coins going clinkity clink, clinkity clink. He leaped out of his bed and to the door. Then he hurried back. But his head had barely touched the pillow when he had heard clinkity clink, clinkity clink. Then he heard something way off in the distance. It was a voice crying, "Who's got my money? Who's got my money? Who? Who?" And then the wind blew biz, biz, bazoo! And the fire flared and flickered and snapped and popped, and the money went clinkity clink, clinkity clink. The gravedigger was really scared. He got out of bed again and piled all the furniture against the door, and He put a heavy iron skillet over the tin box. Then he jumped back into bed and covered his head with the blankets. But the money rattled louder and louder, and way off a voice cried, "Give me my money! Who's got my money?" "Who? Who?" And the wind blew, and the fire flared and flickered and snapped and popped, and the gravedigger shivered and shook and cried, "Oh, Lordy, Lordy!" Suddenly the front door flew open, and in walked the ghost of a dead woman with her eyes wide open, staring at everything and seeing nothing. And the wind blew, biz, biz, bazoo! And the money went clinkety clink, clinkety clink. And the fire flared and flickered and snapped and popped. And the ghost of the dead woman cried, "Oh, where is my money? Who's got my money? Who? Who?" And the gravedigger moaned, "Oh, Lordy, Lordy." The ghost could hear the money going clinkety clink in the tin box, but her dead eyes couldn't see the box. So she reached out with her arms to try to find it. And the wind went, biz, biz, bazoo! And the money flared, and the fire flared and flickered and snapped and popped. And the gravedigger shivered and shook and moaned, "Oh, Lordy, Lordy." And the woman cried, "Give me my money. Who's got my money? Who? Who? You got it!" Oh, it's electric. Did I get you? Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. This last story is a quick one for today. It's titled The Bride. The minister's daughter had just gotten married. After the wedding ceremony, there was a great feast with music and dancing, and contests and games, even old children's games. When they got to playing hide and seek, the bride decided to hide her grandfather's trunk up in the attic. "They'll never find me there," she thought. As she was climbing into the trunk, the lid came down and cracked on her head, and she fell unconscious inside. The lid slammed shut and locked. No one will ever know how long she called for help, or how hard she struggled to free herself from that tomb. Everyone in the village searched for her, and they looked almost everywhere, but no one thought of looking in the trunk. After a week, her brand new bridegroom and all the others gave her up for lost. Years later, a maid went up to the attic looking for something she needed. "Maybe it's in the trunk," she thought. She opened it and screamed. There lay the missing bride in her wedding dress. By then, she was only a skeleton. So, friends, hopefully we didn't scare you too much today. I'm Mr. Lures, and we'll see you next time when we continue to read out of the Spooky Story Treasury. Have a great night.